Yeah, he'll always be Iron Man to me.
Hi, I'm Andy,
And I'm Roger,
and welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics.
on our search to find the middle.
We're going to give you last week's news today. It's
That's a slogan we should put on a t-shirt.
Stop touching her!
I am tonight announcing my candidacy.
Taylor Swift. Look, my biggest issue with marriage is that I think that it's a fundamentally flawed institution that is built on the oppression of women.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Having truly rational conversations about controversial issues is risky these days.
Roger.
Andy, how you doing?
4.5 months? Is that the, how many Scaramucci's is that?
Well, was it 133 days or something is the limit to be some kind of advisor, governmental advisor, right?
I'm not too sure, but I don't think the law kind of guides these things, does it?
Well,
And not in the Trump administration. I don't know, for anyone listening to this in, 25 years' time, who doesn't know the contemporary context. So it is Friday, Australian Eastern Standard Time, Friday night. We're following the news, the latest news, the Twitter storm between, or what is it called, X, between Trump and, of course, its owner, Elon Musk, although I think Trump was using the one that he owns as well, Truth Social.
I thought he would have wanted Elon to buy that.
The honeymoon's over. I don't think it was that hard to predict. I think there might have been a little bit of exasperation of like how everyone could see this coming except the people involved. Just goes to show how, what a weird guy Elon Musk really is.
Well, I need to go back and find our episode on it, but we actually made predictions. And I remember that I said that halfway through the year, there'd be a public kind of flame war on X between Trump and Elon. So I think I have pretty much nailed it in my prediction.
Well, we mentioned the mooch before, but this has always been his claim that, I called it. I called it for 4.5 months, but I think he said between 3 and 6 months. So 4.5 months is bang on in the middle. Yeah. So I'm going to claim it. I called it. I'm gloating, but I don't know. I got to say, this wasn't that hard to see. This was just like saying I called summer. I called that it was going to get warmer towards the end of the year. I don't think this was ever going to end in any other way. Was there anyone really thinking that in 4 years' time they were going to be still bros?
Look, I think that it's easy to bet on something falling apart, right? It's a tough environment. It's like you said, it would be like seeing a Hollywood couple and saying, "Oh, I bet they don't last." When you know that the lifespan of these things, because of the environment and the context of their jobs, makes it near impossible to stay together in a marriage. And I think politics is like that, right? Washington is like that. So that's an easy bet to take. But what I was quite surprised by how well they were working together and the way that they extended and supported each other for so long. And I think it's kind of like that, we should view this partnership in terms of political years, not regular years. Yeah, the time is different.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it was always a little bit clunky. There was always moments where Elon Musk, I think he sort of seemed to enjoy the party element of the Trump campaign, and that period where it was they were reveling in just how how great it was that they won. But I don't know, there's been, a few moments on tariffs, on the deportations, where I think Elon Musk kind of clearly was not on the same page, right? And I don't think they really work together. I
guess what I'm saying,
Trump used Musk as his okay, let's let this guy be the fall guy for a lot of things.
They used each other though. I think that what I mean by that is that there were many other opportunities for Trump to stick it to Elon, right? And I don't think that there was evidence of the opposite, of actually the news media handing Trump kind of fodder for him to turn on Elon, and he held it together longer than I thought. And even things like the secondhand Tesla dealership that they popped up, the pop-up at the White House, things like that, right? I think that Trump didn't have to do that, and I don't think it's I'm not trying to paint Trump out as a good person. I'm just saying he held it together longer than I thought he would have. Now, I want to ask a few questions, right? Because it's all started to unravel for Elon. Number one, Do you believe that his story around his black eye is, do you believe that he was just roughhousing with it?
I'm pretty sure there's the story, whatever. I actually don't know what his excuse was.
It was
What did he say?
roughhousing with his kid, with X.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
No, but it gets better than that. Let me finish it. So he said to him, "You can punch me in the face. Like, punch me in the face."
Yeah, no, it doesn't sound the most... I mean, it's not the most believable story, is it? Like, but, I mean, I wouldn't be that surprised if there was, like, some kind of punch-up, like, among grown men in the White House. Like, that's, in some ways, the more probable situation. The guy's weird. Like, he's on drugs, he's...
Okay, yeah. Well, that was the
very
second
successful.
Part, Andy. Like, there's a lot of allegations flying around how this dude is, like, tripped out in a K-hole, abusing ketamine on, psychedelics. Is there any real proof of this? Like, what? Like,
yeah,
what
the Joe Rogan experience.
When he took one puff of the spliff.
Well, like, I mean, he's clear. Look, okay, I'm not like a prude on drugs, okay? I think for a guy who lives in Austin, Texas, which is known for being a little bit out there, for a guy who's like Silicon Valley like esque, even though he's not living there anymore, I think this is that world. Like, there's an openness to like things outside the box, and like especially like psilocybin, like that's right in his wheelhouse, like something like that. Like, that's like, in fact, I'd be shocked if he hadn't, because this is a guy who wants like new experiences. So
let me be a bit more targeted.
He wants to put a man on fucking Mars. This guy doesn't want to constrain.
He goes to Mars regularly himself.
No, but like his horizons are far beyond the like say no to drugs kind of.
No. Okay, let me sharpen it up. Do you believe that he's been abusing drugs while holding, his support and campaigning for Trump, as they are portraying that he's out of his mind, feral on ketamine?
I'll answer it in a different way. I don't think his drug taking explains his support for Trump, but I think he was taking drugs. I don't have proof, but that seems plausible to me.
Yeah. Man, it's so hard to tell, because when you take someone who is obviously...
Well, hasn't he admitted to like... I don't know, in the past?
No, he admitted that he actually used ketamine as some kind of mental therapy prescribed.
Yeah, well,
right?
isn't that...
But, okay. All I will say is that, if someone is on the spectrum and they're already a little bit, neurodivergent or not, atypical, then, I don't think you can read too much into it sometimes.
All right. Well, let me ask you a question. What do you think's next for him? Is he going to join the Democrats?
I have been thinking about this a little bit, right? So this is like waking up from a really bad bender, and you've blacked out a few times. You're not really sure what happened. You've got bruises. You just know that you need to start writing apology letters because lots of people are really mad at you, right? And I think that this idea of him going back to aligning himself with the Democrats, or actually getting even more involved with them, I just don't think that's possible on a personal level. Like, I don't think that he's going to be able to go back to the people who fucking crucified him, who almost encouraged the firebombing of his dealerships, all this kind of stuff, right? Like, I just don't see that as a possibility from the pathology of Elon that we've seen. Now, what I think is an interesting take on it is whether he is in a place mentally where he has such delusions of grandeur, or maybe he just has broken through that ceiling of caring, but whether, like he's made a tweet, "It is time to create a new political party in America that actually represents 80% in the middle." And then he put a poll out there to his, 250 million followers. Does he do something like that? Does he become like the Clive Palmer of politics, right? Like, does he fund and create a new party?
I don't think that's on the cards. I think he will stay out of politics. I think he'll have his axes to grind. I think he will maybe want to settle scores in the same ways he did with the Democrats. In fact, you could probably argue the only reason he supported Trump was to settle scores with the Democrats. So I think he'll do the same. I think it'll be very driven by, like, so if he does start a party like that,
maybe
it
not
will
like
be
a
to
party,
settle
but
scores.
some kind of movement. That
but it will be to settle scores. Like, so I can totally see him trying to actively turn the podcast, what do they call it? Podosphere? What do you call it? Podcastistan? I don't know. Anyway, turning that against Trump. I could totally imagine him like having some conversations with Joe Rogan, saying, "Hey man, you got to be actively opposing this guy now. Let me give you the updated advice. Here's your talking points." And I can see that happening. I can see others of that ilk. Yeah, like I think he's like a very immature man. Like really, that's going to be like front of mind for him. I can't see him going back to the Democrats in the sense of like, oh well, the best way to oppose Trump is to support the Democrats. Like I don't think it's going to be like that, because I think now he's been burned by both sides of politics, and I think he genuinely is passionate against like woke politics. Like,
do you think that he's really been burned and that Trump has really chewed him up and spit him out? Because I don't see that.
His ego has been burned. His ego. So he's gone in thinking, I am basically the de facto president of the United States. I'm the most competent person in this administration. And he's demonstrated a combination of the fact that he clearly wasn't the most competent person. Oh, actually, maybe he was the most competent person in the administration, but he certainly didn't achieve much competence through his Doge initiatives. And he hasn't come out being respected as the most competent person in the administration by Trump, by the, community, by thought leaders, whatever. So I think his ego is bruised and he wants out. And I think he's prepared to settle scores now. I think he's prepared to, his biggest risk is actually not financial. His biggest risk is like deportation or jail, Like he should be genuinely worried about, like, can he get pulled up? Like, can he be put in prison? Like, I'm sure he's committed crimes. Like
what do you mean by
everything
that?
Everything he did in Doge, like there will be a law on the statute book that Elon Musk would have broken because, whether it's like probity, whether it's whatever
code of conduct thing, but he's still just advisory, right?
No, well, he was running, he was involved in government decisions. I'm just saying that, like, if you can like freaking deport people with no evidence at all and whack them in a horrific jail in El Salvador, then it's not that much of a stretch to think that Musk would be deported or put in jail in America for some crime. Like I totally think that's like on the cards, and he should worry about that.
Well, anyway, look, there is a part of me that feels maybe it's too far for me to say that I feel sorry for Elon. But I do feel a sense of like sadness at the missed opportunity of it all, right? Like I think maybe if he just had a little bit of if he had a handler, like someone that he still trusted to kind of help him. So it's not just like a one-man assault on the world, Elon versus the world, right? Like I think that the dude's obviously got so much to offer. He's so brave and courageous as well. Think of like the risk, like the personal risk and of doing what he's done, right? Like I just actually think that alone is impressive. And if he just had a team around him that were looking out for his best interest, like that's what I feel that's missing when I see someone like Elon. Like he's very lonely, and I can tell that from the outside that he is lonely. Like he doesn't have anyone there. Like he doesn't have bros looking out for him. He doesn't have family. Like he just doesn't have that people that care about him, right, and are trying to protect him. Well, if he does, that's not evident.
Well, you said it's a missed opportunity. I don't know if you meant it quite in the sense that somehow this experiment could have been successful. But this was always doomed to fail. Like, not just because of the personal relationships and the politics and the, all of those things, but just because someone like Elon Musk was never going to achieve what he thinks he could achieve in reforming the US government. He was never going to. He was always the wrong guy for the job. He didn't understand what he was doing. He had successes building rockets, but that's different to the success, like the attributes needed to reform government. The whole thing was flawed and destined to be a failure from the outset. And I think the disappointment or the regret or the whatever word you want to use about it is that like this is a big shine off his like kind of almost Stark Industries kind of reputation, right? It's this.
Yeah, he'll always be Iron Man to me.
This guy has achieved, all these amazing things in other, like, is this kind of, we both read the, Walter Isaacson? Yeah, we both read that biography and, you come out of reading that book and I did anyway, thinking, I kind of like this guy, like he's a bit weird. He's got his flaws, but I like him. Then he did the whole Trump thing and then I didn't like him. And so part of me now is healing. Like he's on my side now. So I'm kind of ready to give him some space to flourish as a person that I can start to sympathize with again and start to like again. But I don't know.
Shoots.
That was a pretty mad kind of.
Nah, but man, see, this is probably
there.
where I differ from you, Andy. That whether it's JD Vance or Elon, like I haven't totally written them off, and I think that when I say missed opportunity, it's always going to be hard. I mean, if anything, this shows you that you can't treat the government like a business, private business, right? Which everyone kind of knows, but it's more that like it wasn't structured enough for a long enough period. Like it burnt out too quick. You know what I mean? And I think that a lot of people who are frustrated with the situation are willing to let some real wild cards come in to see what they can do. What's the harm? And we saw what the harm is, but I think that kind of concept was warranted given the political context of the time, right?
I don't know. I think in 50 years' time, we're going to remember this as like the worst, most maladaptive period of administration in government anywhere. And yes, a big part of that is Trump's own obsession with stupid things like tariffs. But another big part of it is going to be just this crazy shit that they did. Like just this period of like not knowing what they're doing, like actually not knowing what they're doing, really not knowing what they're doing. And then that supercharged by the fact that they thought that they did know what they're doing. They thought that they were like doing the right thing, but they were so wrong and they were so misguided, and that they didn't know what they didn't know is the problem. And someone like Elon Musk, that's unfortunate because
it's a different framing.
He's done a lot of great things.
It's a different framing, and all I can say is that there's not many people who are willing to roll up a stake like this, right? And those people don't come along very often, right? That with the means, the agenda, and the fortitude to try to change things. And that's all I mean. It's a wasted opportunity that someone couldn't harness it in the right direction, and put a little bit of round off those harsh corners and actually have this thing sustained for a long time. Because like the reality, like I said, these people don't come along often, and I include Trump in that, right?
It's not the people though.
You need the people too, though, right?
No, it's the context, right? It's like don't waste a crisis, right? So, and I don't think it actually was a crisis, but let's imagine you do have a crisis and you have the wrong people, then that's the missed opportunity, and that's what happened now. Wrong people, and if you suggest to me for a second, no, it kind of was the right people, well, I think you've got to look at the facts.
Yeah, no, I can't argue there.
All right.
Yeah.
Next topic for this week. This is around the grounds session. There's a few topics we haven't touched on. The coalition. So in the 2025 Australian federal election, we've discussed before, crushing victory for the Labor Party, and I guess the flip side of that is a crushing defeat for the coalition. Now, what we've seen in the coalition is the National Party's seats, which is the country party side of the coalition. They didn't really lose any of their seats. They sort of maintained fairly steady. But the Liberal Party, that's sort of the more metropolitan side of the coalition.
Yeah.
They're bleeding. No metropolitan seats in Adelaide. I think a handful in Melbourne and Sydney. And Brisbane. So this is really devastating for, I guess, the Liberal Party specifically, because their traditional support has dried up. And you've had this like divorce, right? This temporary divorce between the Nationals and the Liberal Party, with the Nationals trying to eke out more kind of, or like stake a more influential position in the coalition, without kind of realizing that maybe we might say the Nationals and the maybe the more conservative members of the Liberal Party have like kind of cooked the golden goose. They've kind of over-egged the pudding, and their pathway to power is kind of looking pretty thin now.
Yeah. I want to kind of talk a little bit about the split. Because, like they state the four main reasons for the split, right? Something around the lines of, nuclear energy, it's got to be still there. We want the supermarket divestiture, the regional funds, the $20 billion regional fund, and give us more telco, right? Give us more telecommunications, right? Do you think that's a really like the sticking point?
If you're the Liberal Party, I think you can superficially grant all of those. Superficially. I don't think that means we're going to move to a world where like we're going to be having state investment in nuclear power. But you could just, for example, get rid of the ban on nuclear power and just say, well, if the private sector wants to build this shit, then hey, we're not going to block it. And that could be a very reasonable position to hold, right? I think with divestiture, that's not kind of considered very fondly in business circles. And then the telecommunications. Well, I think like honestly, like regional. I actually don't know what the telecommunications aspect was, but if that's connected to the fund, there was a fund that like it meant to be a fund for regional Australia. But look, the whole process was really stupid because those demands were made after Susan Ley, the Liberal Party leader, had already committed to consulting the party room on policy positions, and then they demand basically that, no, you must take these policies. And so she sort of was snookered, like there was no room for her to move to begin with, right?
You don't have the cards right now.
It does seem to be like a little bit of a play, like a power play to say, hey, we're now more important in this. So like we're not going to just be the tack on kind of group of MPs that vote along with you. But now we actually need more of a say. But of course, on things like net zero, like that, you kind of need, the urban voters on your side to get your broader agenda. And you have to kind of accept that, the Australian electorate now doesn't support like a Tony Abbott era policy on climate change. So there is, there's just a lot of things here that seems a bit of a power play, but one that's very short-sighted.
So they've agreed to, in principle, right, for those 4 points, and they now have had a very small split and they're back together. But what is it actually like, in your opinion, what's the trauma? Like, what's the actual damage to the situation?
I don't think the actual theatre of this matters, right? No one in 3 years' time is going to remember, that first week after they had that crushing loss, they were in a little bit of a shambles, so, I'm never going to vote for them again. Like, that's not how people think. They'll have forgotten about this a long, long time ago. But, like, it's more fundamental than that. Like, this is not a 2025 thing. Like, this is actually something that probably was evident the moment John Howard lost in 2007. Like, you had this factional kind of, like, who's going to win out, the moderates or the conservatives in the Liberal Party. The conservatives kind of had some successes. The moderates all fled the party. The successes for the, conservative side, like Tony Abbott era and then, and onwards, like, they were kind of appealing to, certain instincts that maybe are declining in Australian politics. So, and then when you lose all your moderates, they started losing seats to, Cathy McGowan in Indi, back in 2014 20, whenever the election was, when Tony Abbott won. Like, so there's these things that happened even back then, which was a sign of like them being a little bit out of touch with a group of voters who traditionally would support them. Then of course we had Zali Steggall that beat Tony Abbott, in Warringah. And then you have,
didn't need enough onions that day.
Yeah. So like this is very, like you had Malcolm Turnbull. He was like probably the last sort of stand for like the moderate voices in the Liberal Party.
When you hear the commentary about the future and learnings and what the coalition needs to do, it's always some form of reconstruct or revitalize the broad church, right? And try to kind of bring more people in, right? A game of addition rather than subtraction. But like that seems so improbable. Like, how is that even possible when the middle now is just kind of claimed by the Labor Party? And, like you've got this dynamic happening where younger people, the women are becoming more progressive and men are like starting to veer off. Like, I just don't see that advice or that kind of idea of rebuilding the coalition. What can they take out of that?
Well, you got to do it. I mean, you can't win elections by being seen as the best thing since sliced bread by your, like, the 5% of the people, like the community who you're trying to appeal to, because there's another 95% of the population. So you've got to have something for everybody. Now, I think the thing with the coalition more than the Labor Party is they have always been like, we're for everyone who doesn't want to vote Labor. Like, we're the alternate side of politics. And you can trust us. You can vote for us. Like, you might not like everything we do, but we're here and we're competent and we can do a good job running the country. Now, the thing is, in a two-party political system, eventually Labor's going to get on the nose. I mean, Labor were on the nose. Like, let's be honest. They had a pretty shit first term. And it was only the start of this year that we were talking about how they might even lose. Like, the coalition were ahead in the betting odds, only months ago. So they'll be on the nose again. And people will want to have a competent alternative that they can vote for. And at the moment, what you have is this kind of like broken up coalition of like anti-Labor voters. So you've got the Teals, you've got, some kind of right-wing elements and parties coming in. And eventually the community will want an alternative to Labor. But the coalition isn't healthy enough to be that alternative. So they really have to have a model that allows people in the city who aren't so turned off or repulsed by, what they've got to say, that they are willing to vote for them as a competent alternative government. And I think until they can do that, they're not going to win an election.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, sometimes you take caution in reacting to the drama of it all so close to a devastating defeat like this. And, I think you're right too about whether not much of the scar tissue will be left come the next election. I mean, look at this kind of killing season where the leaders of these parties are being stabbed in the back and wholesale turns, and people just get on with it. I think people have short memories when it comes to this stuff. So, yeah.
I think one thing as well is, that always gets overlooked whenever people do this kind of like analysis, highbrow political analysis of, well, you know what, like they weren't right-wing enough or they weren't left-wing enough or this policy sucked or whatever. But like, I think actually people care more about the notion that you seem like a competent person to trust with government. Like, people value competence and perceptions of competence. So you can be actually like a right-wing figure. You can be a left-wing figure. I don't think the general public really care if they think you're competent, if they think you can run a fucking chook raffle, and I think, unfortunately, they like, I mean, the previous experience with coalition was, the Morrison government. And I think that had its moments. And I think that's, people think about that and they think, well, gee, I don't know. I kind of felt like Scott Morrison was maybe better at this thing even than, Peter Dutton. So like, why would I vote for Peter Dutton? Now, I think that's that way. Like, but I think if you can get competent people who are boring, who look like they're, technocrats who seem to be sensible. It doesn't really matter whether they're left wing or right wing or whatever, moderate. It's a brand, like of your brand. Like, do you come across as someone who can make the right decisions at the right time? And, I think Albo had his moments of proving otherwise where people did sort of question his judgment. But I think in the end, if you look at the campaign between Peter Dutton and Albo, I mean, like, there's no question he came across as the more competent of the leaders, and who did they reward? So anyway, I think that when a two-party system, people get very sick of Labor, if not in the next 3 years, then certainly in the future. And you need to have a solid alternative ready to go, otherwise you're not going to
win. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to a rather tough topic, revisiting the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Gaza. Now, it would be fair to say, Andy, that the collective media tone has taken a shift probably in the last 3 weeks. I suppose post the ceasefire and post the Riviera of the Middle East vision was brought to the table.
Oh, I think a lot of it was already on the curve of turning for quite some time now. But I think, if this were a parabolic shape, we would be at the exponential end of the curve, in the sense that, you now have like European governments are now changing their views. You've got people now legitimately talking about, well, we need to not supply weapons anymore. Yeah, a lot of the support that Israel had is being questioned. So you have rhetorical positions that governments have been, we've got to be both sides, but they've still been supplying weapons, right, to Israel.
Yeah.
They've still been supporting Israel. So, they've obviously had to appease kind of factional elements in their country and in their parties and so on. But that seems to be changing, and I think, I don't know if you managed to read the piece by Josh Sepps in the Sydney Morning Herald, the other day, but he wrote a piece that was spent the first half pretty much setting out the case for Israel, saying how, look, hey, like a lot of these people who are pro-Palestinian or anti-Israel kind of really don't know what they're talking about, but Israel has definitely overreached, and here's the reasons why, sort of thing. So I think there's a lot more of that. So the people who would have been staunch defenders of Israel, and I'm sorry, and that's not to classify Josh Sepps in those terms, but he is someone who probably is a bit more disdainful of some of the more superficial support for Palestinian causes, I guess. Yeah, I mean, there's, I think back in, when this first happened, I think, I said, the thing is that Israel's going to overshoot. They're going to go too far, and that's going to be bad for them in the long run. And I think that's what's happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's an impossible situation. This is all calculated. It's all planned. It is irrefutable at this point that it is part of the Hamas strategy to raise the political cost of executing this war by providing environments that actually promote the targeting and death of their civilian population. So it's a very hard situation to be in. And I think that it's probably to this idea of, for people on the outside, when I've spoken to people, they thought that perhaps the ceasefire and whatever may come was a natural breathing point or a natural inflection point of saying, hey, look, you've wiped out the threat to the north. Hezbollah's completely decimated. You've executed all this attacks on the terrorist infrastructure and leadership. Gaza's very leveled. You've pushed all the way down to Rafah, in the south. What is there left to do? And when you feel like that, and then you start to hear this second round of, we're ramping up again. We're doing some heavy bombardments. We're doing, we're going in again. And I think that's just where people would just say, hey, look, you've already crippled things. I don't understand why you're going harder, not softer. And I think for people on the outside, it's hard not to feel that instinctively of saying, hey, look, how much of a threat can they be anymore? You've leveled everything. So I get it. I totally get it. But at the same time, you do need to understand that and really try to come to grips with it, that it is part of Hamas's strategy to put their civilians in this situation, which is very, very hard to comprehend as well.
Well, but both can be true. Israel can be acting abhorrently and going too far, and Hamas can be worse.
Correct.
Those two things can be simultaneously true.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that it's one of those dynamics where the demonstrations for the Palestinian support are really only one side of the argument, right?
Well, I think they would probably say that what they're out there protesting about is about the lives and well-being of people living in Gaza, and that, yes, they're protesting Israel because Israel's the one dropping the bombs, and that if you want to say Hamas is worse, then fine, but that doesn't change. It doesn't change much, right? I think it's very complicated. A lot of the people out protesting, they're protesting that, well, not all of them. There's lots of different coalitions of people that want to support the Palestinian cause. But, if you've got ties to that part of the world, it's quite a personal thing. It's your homeland, or you see it that way. And that guides, that affects how you see the situation. So I actually don't know. I would agree, or I'm not sure if this is what you were suggesting, but I don't think that it's incumbent on you as a protester to clarify that you're also against Hamas to be critical of Israel.
No, I definitely wasn't. That wasn't my position. But let's be real, right? That's not a view that the majority of them hold, right?
I don't know.
If you're trying to sell me the concept that the people that are in these marches and things.
There's a lot of naive people in these marches. So there's a lot of people who go to these marches who probably don't even really know why they're chanting from the river to the sea. Like, they probably don't really understand that. Or don't really have a good grasp of the history. They just thought, oh, my uni mates were going to this thing, so I thought I'd join along and wave the flag. Like, so I think there's also a lot of people who live in Gaza who aren't very fond of Hamas. So I don't think it's necessarily true to say that they support Hamas, but they probably support now increasingly whatever it takes to like stick it to fucking Israel. Like, that's their starting point, right? It's against them. It's a very personal thing. Like, and this is why this is why it happened in the first place. Like, it's beyond like rational decisions. If it was rational decisions, we'd have a 2-state solution already. But it's beyond that. Like, it's been beyond that for a very long time. And I don't know that you can really expect these people to be approaching it with that, like, well, first we must be really super clear about how, like, they probably haven't thought of it in those terms.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm just saying that I don't buy a story of, that the protesters. It's not the right context, or it's not the right kind of players for you to expect for them to have a balance to this. They're not kind of saying Hamas need to free all hostages, Israel need to stop bombing. No, they're shouting global intifada, right, over and over again. It's just something to be acknowledged here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people protesting, the war in Iraq were protesting the war in Iraq, not like down with Osama bin Laden and then end the war in Iraq. And that
America should be dissolved.
Yeah, you protest what you're there to protest. You don't protest other things, right? This isn't a freaking like geopolitics paper or essay and that, has to pass academics,
Yeah, no, I agree.
Peer review set, like, this is like, no, we're passionate, we're motivated, we're here for a cause. And I think it's, I think they probably do have views about Hamas. Like, I think they probably do have very strong views against Hamas, but it's like, it's complicated because in some kind of weird way, they're like their side, they're the same side,
Well, yeah, it's this whole thing, isn't it, Andy? It's like, is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And if you believe that Israel is the actual enemy because of your view on colonization and their right for the land and all the founding sins or whatever you believe, then yeah, like they're your guys, right?
Well, terrorists are only terrorists when they're not considered freedom fighters. So, freedom fighters, I mean,
one man's terrorists, right?
Like, yeah, I mean, it's not, they don't have any, they see themselves as not having any means, and they're there to fight and do what it takes to have a solution once and for all. I mean, we look at it and go, fucking crazy people, right? But it's not necessarily how they see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think that the media response is appropriate for all the things that I mentioned. I do kind of wonder for people in the West, or people say who are protesting in Sydney, like what it looks like, like what this intractable problem, right? That will, where is it going to take them? Like what do they? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think maybe they would say, don't worry about steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Worry about steps 1 to 3, which include stopping the killing, and peace, and like a ceasefire, and like no bombs, no more deaths. And let's just get to that point, and then we can think about, then once we've got to that point, we can think about the next steps. I think that's how they would.
Yeah.
And that's not unreasonable.
That's, I mean, there's a big part of me that feels the same way about the Russia-Ukraine thing that we've spoken about, that actually when you're gridlocked, just stop killing for a second.
Well, I mean, I do think there's like parallels with like World War I, right? Where you just had this meat grinder for years and years because it's just like, no, neither side was advancing. It was just, let's just like throw more men at these. And you just think, why? But like you set up a really bad equilibrium I mean, this is a little bit different, very different actually, but like maybe not in the macro sense, in the sense that there is no like Treaty of Versailles.
Can I share with you something? I must admit, I had a conversation. Well, it wasn't directly with me, but it was with someone who didn't have any skin in the game with this current conflict, but they had similar. They were African, had a similar experience, terrorism, kind of in the Bosnia style. I won't go into it, but anyway, the way what I want to share is the way in which they described it, which I think is a very crude, very dark way, but I think is actually how some people feel about it, that are in this mix, that have been in these kind of war-torn environments and so on. And what he said was, when you have terrorists, it's like dealing with a cancer. And the problem is, you can beat back all the cancer cells, you can go through surgery and cut them all out, but unless you destroy every single one of those cells, they will multiply. And that's why you got to go through chemo and surgery and just blast it. You can't let even one survive, because the cancer will come back. And man, like, that's so dark, right? Because that is kind of describing, in an ethno-state, a genocide, right? But I can understand, because you kind of have to, like, you must get to this mentality where it's like, if we don't clear it all out, then it'll just come back, right? And I think that is such a dangerous mindset to get into, and it's one of desperation. It's one of, like a cycle of violence and revenge and blood feuding. But I think that's genuinely how sometimes they feel.
I think the problem with that analogy, I mean, I don't think it's wrong, but it's just that it's to sort of presume that, the cancer cells are just the people, the people who live there, who maybe have weapons under their bed, or who dwell, tunnel dwellers or whatever. Whereas the actual cells are the ideas. So it's the ideology that constitutes the cancer. And you might be able to kill a few cells infected with the ideology, but when you're doing what's currently happening, you're only amplifying the ideology to a whole new group of susceptible young people who will now have their own personal, fresh experiences with this really horrible, horrific regime across the border. And then, obviously we're not in any way suggesting that, like, a good policy outcome here would be just the complete annihilation of every single man, woman, and child living in Gaza. So we don't have any people there ever again. Like, that's not what we're suggesting. But let's say some version of that. You had some kind of, deal with, between Israel, the United States, and, Saudi Arabia or something, right? They said, look, let's just, clear everyone out of Gaza. Let's just, we'll clear it out. We'll move people somewhere else. We'll do everything that they said. Then you're exporting terrorism around the world, because those people are not going to be suddenly of a view that, oh yeah, now the problem's solved, we're just going to get on with our lives. No, you're just going to have more people who are going to feel even more aggrieved. The problem's not going to go away. It's now an idea. It's even something that binds the Muslim world now. It's solidarity with Palestinians. You are only serving to amplify that, and you can actually make the problem way worse. So I think I get the analogy, but I don't think it prescribes this sort of current approach.
Yeah, it's absolutely this, ideas are harder to kill than people at the end of the day. I totally get that. And, it was just kind of a bit of a horror. It's horrifying to hear the words. I think that's what I reflected on, because you get it straight away. You understand it. And I think that people who are actively living in these areas and faced with their threat, that probably is a big part of how they feel. It's like a survival thing. We need to clear out the threat completely. But like you said, it ends up in horrific outcomes. I guess this is where maybe say someone like a Sam Harris would say it needs to be the war of ideas needs to be won. Right?
All right. Well, to end on a cheerier note, I'm going to ask you, give me 3 positive, uplifting recommendations. Maybe recommendations, superficial stuff.
All right. Okay. So the first one for me has got to be the Nintendo Switch 2 console. Bought it for my kids people have been waiting for a long time, classic games. And yes, nostalgic is part of enjoying childhood, low stakes. So that's my first one. The second one was actually, I was at a bar in the city, and it started to get a little bit late towards dinner time, and they had a meat raffle. I just thought to myself, is there anything more Australian than getting a bunch of drunk people around and raffling off an oversized tray of raw red meat, like sausages and steaks? And then these drunk bastards have to somehow carry this, defrosting raw tray of meat home with them on the train or on the, it's just so weird that we still do that. And it's still like so popular.
I think it's sort of deliberately kitsch, isn't it? Like it's,
it's just so good. And, I was in quite a inner city area where there's lots of vegans as well. And it was still, like we're going to give away this massive, 5 kilo meat tray of raw meat. And the third one and final one that was talking about nostalgia is, I had to do a corporate workshop, like an all day workshop, in the last little while. And they had, how they give you lollies to keep you going, and they're all like individually wrapped. They're specially made for these workshops and conferences.
Too much mint.
Too much mint. Usually they're shit. They're like Mentos or really old stale Mentos that are individually wrapped. But this particular time there was individually wrapped redskins. And I don't think I've had a redskin like in my 30s.
They weren't called redskins though, were they?
Oh, were they? Did they change that?
Haven't they had to change the name?
Oh, I thought they were still called redskins in Australia. Anyway,
I'm sure.
Maybe I didn't read it properly, but they were redskins. Okay, they were redskins. Oh, I haven't had one in my 30s, and
they're called. Do you know what they're called? Sorry, they're called Red Rippers now.
Red Rippers.
Yep.
Did they obscure like any part of the American Indian reference, or do they still have the headrest?
Yeah. So redskins. Red Rippers.
Red Rippers. Okay. Well, anyway. And I've got to say, like, it blew it literally, the taste of a redskin is so distinctive and it's so artificial that it's undeniable. It's like having red cordial. It's just so delicious and distinctive. And I was like, oh my God, why haven't I had, this is such a little treat. Why have I never had this before? But anyway, there's my three.
All right. My three. I've been catching up on the White Lotus because I never watched it when it, went around, and I just subscribed to HBO Plus or whatever it's called. And I thought, okay, I'll work through it. So I've finished season 1 and I'm about midway through season 2. I think I recall people casting shade on season 2 relative to season 1. I don't know. Maybe I've just sort of misremembered, but I finished like one episode that I just thought was really good. Just really good. Like there's not even a thing to explain why it was good, but it just felt like this is such a good exploration of humanity. And I just thought maybe it wasn't quite as like comedic or, outrageous as season 1, but it just felt more meaningful. So anyway, that's the first one, White Lotus. Second one, and thinking about our own podcast. I mean, I love this podcast called Econ Talk, right? Russ Robertson, Econ Talk. And he recently did a 1000th episode special, a monologue, just with himself, no guest, although he used ChatGPT to ask himself questions. And there was just something about, like, not only to acknowledge the achievement of doing 1000 episodes. I mean, this is a guy who's been doing this now like since 2008 or something, right?
Yeah, OG.
But yeah, just like, I just want to say, like, this is kind of like, as a secular, non-religious person, probably what I think is the closest thing to going to church. And of course, he's like fairly, he's a man of faith, right? He's Jewish, right? And that's not what his show's about, but like, I can totally tell he gets his style from, like, is influenced by what I in my mind imagine religion to be. Anyway, so I want to give a shout out to that. And I'm going to go very, very superficial for my third one, which is, I had this cheesy moment of like YouTube, when you end up down a rabbit warren with YouTube, you end up watching videos that you can't quite explain why you're currently watching that video. I think I watched a video of like, there's this guy on YouTube called the Professor of Rock, and he does these top 10 kind of countdown style things. Anyway, I think it was like top 10 like power ballads from the 80s or something. And number 1 was Home Sweet Home by Motley Crue. And I'm kind of like, I'm not really that into Motley Crue. I know their music, but I wouldn't go so far as to say like I'm a fan, but I just remember I just went and listened to the solo from that song Home Sweet Home, and like Mick Mars. If you know anything about Mick Mars, he's actually like this really old guy. It's like he's like the oldest guy in Motley Crue. Like he's like 10 years older than the rest of them. So he's like 75 now. And like, there's just this like video of him playing it for the last time, the solo to that. And he's just this old bloke who's like, can barely stand up, playing this solo. And it just, I don't know, it kind of connected with me in a way that, I was like, oh, and I just wanted to keep listening to that solo. So it's just, there's something kind of, emotional about it. Like it's not one of those like shredding style. Like it's just very sort of, it's almost like David Gilmour-esque, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my obsession for a couple of days this week.
Well, hey, that's actually better quality wise from some of the YouTube you bring me. So yeah, that's good. That's on the high end. All right.
Over and out.